Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today podcast. I'm Kaz Graham, and in this edition, a new trade deal with the Middle East and tax on red diesel is cut by a third. But there'll be cuts to tariffs on some food imports. What does it all mean for farmers? First, though, it's the Chelsea Flower Show this week. And here on Farming Today, we have gone all floral, hearing from British flower farmers. The cut flower market in the UK is worth about £2.2 billion, but the bulk of flowers sold in supermarkets and florists don't come from British farms like the ones that we've been to see. They're generally imported, as I've been hearing from Jamie Grant from the British Florists Association.
Around 85 to 90% of cut flowers that are sold in the UK are imported. The Netherlands acts as the main trading hub for Europe, but many of those flowers, even that are imported, actually originate elsewhere, so particularly Kenya, Colombia, Ecuador, Ethiopia, places where the climate really allows these flowers to be grown quite naturally outdoors during the colder months.
Can UK growers ever really compete against imports from other countries, like you say, with warmer climates and also much more developed growing infrastructures like, say, the Netherlands?
There is a bit of a resurgence in British grown flowers, particularly over the last decade. Lots of growers that are selling direct as well. So flower farms that are selling direct to consumers for events, for weddings and to florists for them to resell as well. A lot of this is being driven, I think, by changing customer values and by the demand in the market. And, we see that customers increasingly ask whether flowers are in season, whether they're locally grown, and what the impact environmentally might be of growing those flowers.
I mean, interestingly, though, the most recent DEFRA figures for horticulture for 2024 and UK production of flowers and bulbs was down 3% compared with the year before, and imports had increased by 3%.
Yeah, it's very much dependent, because we don't have a huge sector that's supported either by central government or by associations. It's down to individual flower farmers and growers to choose or decide to grow flowers in that year and that season. It can be really difficult. The weather really does play havoc, and I know we hear it lots, perhaps more so with fruit and veg, but I mean, it's exactly the same with flowers. One early summer storm or one night of high winds and you can destroy whole crops and they're gone. You don't get those back.
And how are sales at the moment? Because flowers are a bit of a luxury and people do have less money in their pockets just now, don't they?
They do, and that's certainly something that our members know very well. It's becoming more difficult, more challenging, let's say, to trade, particularly in retail. We know that this year that the wedding flowers market looks like it's going to be down on last year. Retail in general is holding up okay. And actually the figures that are coming out of the Netherlands show that the turnover of flowers, it is internationally, but turnover of flowers is actually up. So, that's a good thing.
Jamie Grant from the British Florists Association. Now, exciting news. The BBC Food and Farming Awards are back. And this year, we're teaming up again with the Archers for the Archers and Farming Today Farming for the Future Award. Charlotte Smith will be judging it, along with Marley Harris, who plays Natasha in The Archers. And we are looking for those people or organisations who are models for how farming can be more resilient and more sustainable. You can nominate from 6 a.m. today, just as this programme finishes, by going to bbc.co.uk/food awards, where you can find all the categories and the terms and conditions and privacy notice. Entries close at midday on the 15th of June. Now, we've talked many times on this programme about the possibility of farmers going out of business. For Tom Clark, whose family has farmed in the Fens for 4 generations, that is now a serious prospect because the business is no longer making money. Tom didn't intend to farm as a career, but took on the family business when his dad died unexpectedly 17 years ago. Well, now he's handed the day-to-day running of the farm to contractors for 2 years to give himself space to think about whether now is the time to quit. Charlotte Smith has been to meet him.
We've just come down the bank to shelter from the wind, and actually you can hear the cuckoo now. So when you made this decision then to stop farming, how hard was that? Did it feel like sort of a bit of a momentous thing to do?
It's not a decision I would have made 5 years ago. Having never wanted to be a farmer particularly and having it thrust upon me, but then come to love it, continuing the legacy of your ancestors and doing my best to keep the promises I made to my dad. That does weigh really heavy. But also, the longer you are on a piece of land, the more you feel like you belong to it. I guess we get hefted like any old flock of sheep. And as I've farmed the land the last 17 years, it has, I guess, become a part of my life. So it wasn't it wasn't an easy decision to make. But by the time I made it, I was at peace with it. Because, I mean, my great-grandfather, my great-grandparents, they bought the farm when it was dirt cheap, when no one wanted to be farmers, and they made a success of it by being entrepreneurs. And I think, and this is how I reconciled it to myself, if I sat down with them, if that was possible, and I showed them the mess I've been making, then they'd say, what are you doing that for? Why would you do that? Why are you carrying on like that? There's no future in that. Do something that's going to do. And the fact is, we could sell the farm tomorrow, put the money in a bank, and be earning 5, 6, 7 times as much as we're getting from the farm. So it's just so logical. It doesn't mean it's an easy one to make.
Do you think maybe you just weren't good enough? That sounds really harsh, but maybe you weren't a good enough farmer.
I'm definitely not a good enough farmer. I think I never planned to be a farmer. I found myself in this situation where I made it work, and it did work for quite a while. But is anyone a good enough farmer when you're facing such massive changes and challenges from the climate, when the supply chain you face is so monumentally multi-million, multinational, huge companies, when inputs can rise from £200 a tonne for fertiliser up to £1,000 based on the decisions of a Russian dictator, where it's a trade where skill is important, but will not decide whether you make or don't make a profit at the end of the day.
And you can hear more from Tom along with Charlotte in On Your Farm this Sunday at 6:30 in the morning. Now, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, laid out her Great British Summer Savings Bonanza in the House of Commons yesterday, aiming to make life a little less expensive for us all. And as part of it, she announced cuts to tariffs on more than 100 food imports sold in supermarkets to help reduce pressure on food prices. We don't know which products yet, but farmers will be wondering what effect that's likely to have on sales of homegrown produce. Also this week, the government is going to reduce fuel duty on red diesel used by farmers by a third. And it's agreed a new trade deal with a group of 6 states in the Gulf, including Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, which will remove export tariffs and open the door to market expansion, though concerns have been raised about the human rights records of some of those Gulf states. Chris Southworth is Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce UK.
We're talking about very practical things. This is good for the regions, good for the north, particularly Scotland. Think salmon, think whiskey. The rest of the UK, think chocolate, cheese, biscuits, tea, halal beef, all of which are high-end products, big demand in the Middle East, an enormous opportunity for the UK to expand all of that with a lot less tariffs. This is a 93% reduction in tariffs. This is really good for trade liberalisation.
And how significant is this deal compared to, say, some of the other deals that we've already seen, things like the trade agreements with South Korea and India?
I think it's really important in the context of a major emerging region, more or less on par with the likes of South Korea, above what we were negotiating with the likes of Australia and New Zealand a few years ago. Should be good news for the farming sector and production sector in the UK. And it's coming at a really good time where things are very challenging. As we all know, we can see the news. This is exactly the kind of direction that we need to see the UK going in.
Where does it sit alongside the Chancellor's announcement yesterday that she's cutting import tariffs on some foodstuffs? I mean, we don't know what the full list of products is yet, but if some imports are going to be cheaper in the shops here, what effect will that have on UK farmers?
There has to be a fine balance struck here. But this is also about reducing the cost of living. So the Chancellor's in a difficult place where she has to balance what comes in, what goes out. But actually, we're, I think, 40% food reliant on other countries. So we don't produce enough food for our own population. We rely on imports. That's a really important part of our food security. We rely on other countries supporting exports in terms of generating growth, but also allowing more imports coming in with fewer duties that allow us or our producers, manufacturers, to have less input costs in order to get those costs on the shelves reduced for the consumer. It's really important.
Chris Southworth from the International Chamber of Commerce UK. And as Chris was saying, that trade deal with those Gulf states should offer new opportunities for British food and farming. So, alongside the cut in fuel duty on red diesel, it looks like farmers might just be happy with the government for once. I've been hearing from NFU President Tom Bradshaw from the Devon County Show.
First of all, the trade deal with the Gulf states is one where there's great opportunity for our British food that has such a high reputation, and for them to safeguard our sensitive sectors within that trade deal while opening up access to the Gulf states is something that we really welcome, and we respect the way they've negotiated that trade deal. And then on the red diesel duty, look, we know how much we've seen red diesel prices rise since the start of this conflict. Our members are highly exposed to this, so the recognition from government of how severe it is and also the action in reducing that fuel duty is something that's very welcome across the farming industry.
What do you make of these reduced tariffs on some food imports announced by the Chancellor yesterday?
Well, look, clearly, if those tariff reductions are on food that we produce here, then that's something that's going to be incredibly concerning for those members that are producing those goods. So we await the detailed list with real interest.
I mean, the government says that the list of products that are involved will be announced next week, and that it does take account of domestic production and food security, and says it doesn't include any significant UK primary agricultural production. Are you confident that that'll be okay? Are you happy with that statement?
That we've been working very hard with the government to try and make sure they understand exactly what we do produce and where we would be most worried about those tariff reductions. But more long term, every time we have a global shock, we can't have a knee-jerk reaction that says, how can we make it cheaper from somewhere else? We should be asking the question, how do we create the investment in UK food production that builds the resilience? We've got that production here and we're less impacted.
You're at the Devon County Show today, along with a lot of other farmers. Do you think people are feeling a little more positive?
There's a real nervousness in the farming industry. They can see all of the challenges with fertiliser prices, energy costs, milk prices collapsing. But I think what these signals start to show is a government which, particularly with the red diesel, is in tune with the challenge. But we will be watching very, very closely about those the reduction in tariffs, because we understand the cost of living crisis, but there's a cost of farming crisis as well. And everybody in this country needs a resilient food system, and profitable, thriving farming businesses is the only way we can deliver the resilience in that food system for the long term.
Tom Bradshaw from the NFU in Devon. And that's all from us for today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.